February 8th. I am Supervisor Peter Parsons, and I call to order the Town of Lewisboro Town Board meeting for Monday, February the 8th, 2020 at 7:30. Before I go further, I want to confirm that Joel has started recording this meeting in accordance with the Governor's Executive Order number 202.1. This meeting is being conducted via Zoom. That link has been provided to the public so they can view the meeting, and we have confirmed that the feed is active and working. I have confirmed with Janet, our town clerk, that the meeting has been duly noticed and legal notice requirements fulfilled. Notice has been placed on the Town of Lewisboro website and included in the email distributions from the town. With me on this Zoom conference meeting from the Town of Lewisboro are members of the town board, Jane Crimmins, Tony Gonsalves, Dan Welsh, and Richard Sclaren. We have a quorum and can vote on any matters that come before the board. In addition, we have the town attorney, Greg Fulchetti, the town clerk, Janet Donahue, and Joel Smith, Facilities Maintenance Director. At the public comment periods, we ask that only the following persons will be permitted to speak: residents of the town of Lewisboro or the Katona-Lewisboro School District, owners of property in the town of Lewisboro, employees of the town of Lewisboro. If you want to speak at the public hearing or make a public comment, please raise your hand at the appropriate time. Joel, is this right? To do that, if you are on Zoom, put your cursor at the bottom of the window and you should see an image of people labeled participants. Is that still valid?
Yes.
Click on that to get a panel on the right-hand side with icons at the bottom. You can then click Raise Hand. Participants who have raised their hand will show up on the host screen in the order that they raise their hand. The host will then unmute you and tell you that you have the floor. You may also have to unmute yourself if your microphone isn't active. We are also asking that your video be off during the duration of the meeting. If you dialed in on a phone, you can raise your hand to indicate you want to talk by pressing *9. We will ask people to give their name and which hamlet they live in upon entry, and to keep their comments to 2 minutes. Our town clerk will be keeping time, and you will hear a timer at the end of the 2 minutes. If someone is disrespectful or uses profanity at this meeting, they will be asked to leave the virtual meeting, just as they would be asked to leave a physical meeting. Please remember that your camera is on, and profanity will not be tolerated in any form, including gestures and acronyms. Now, please stand with me and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'm going to play around with the order of the agenda. I am going to ask, first of all, for the presentation of Cityscape on the scope of the master plan for cell towers in Lewisboro, and then go to a public comment period, which will be limited to that. That will mean that they don't have to stay here for the entire evening meeting. All right, Susan Raybould, would you like to take over and begin the and begin your presentation. Can you unmute Susan?
I unmuted Elizabeth Smith.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, Elizabeth.
And Joel?
So we're waiting on Susan. I know she's on here.
Yeah, she's
Yeah.
on. We
Yes.
have to let her on.
Yeah. So I'm asking her to unmute right now. So
There we go. I was not able to unmute until just now. I just got the signal, so thank you.
okay.
Okay.
And then,
Okay, greetings, everyone. Thank you for having us this evening to do the presentation. I will need to share my screen in order to be able to start the presentation. Okay. All right, wonderful. So I'm going to be discussing this evening the Cooperative Telecommunications Infrastructure Master Plan. This is a project that's being done in conjunction with a total of 8 communities in the northern Westchester County region. Tonight is the presentation for, specifically Lewisboro. So I'm Susan Raybold. I'm the project manager for this project, and with me is one of my co-workers, Elizabeth Harrington Smith.
Hi.
Hi. Cityscape works only for local governments, and we have since 1997. Our project team includes engineering, legal, and planning professionals, contract management, and government administration assistance personnel. We also want to make sure that everyone understands that we do not build towers. We do not own towers. We do not sell a wireless service to subscribers, and we do not do site acquisition for the industry. We only work for local governments to help understand federal statutory regulations and ways that you can address the industry, the wireless telecommunications industry, on the related policies that most communities have a lot of concerns for. Our contract includes a number of tasks. I'm going to walk through these in order of what you see here. We did rearrange the tasks slightly because of the COVID pandemic. So normally we start the project with preliminary research, and then we have our project initiation meetings, after which we do the infrastructure assessments, meaning we go to each of the sites, we do an inventory catalog, we do a generic mapping analysis, then we review your public policies, we explore potential uses of public land, and then we put together the master plan. Because of the pandemic, we had a window of opportunity to come up this fall where we felt it was safer. And we actually have done the infrastructure assessments already. So I have a few inventory maps later in the presentation to share with you. So the task 1 is the preliminary research. And when we collect our data, we're looking at it from a number of different sources. First, we start with our clients, which would be you, the town of Lewisboro, to see what sort of information you have available on your existing wireless infrastructure. We also compare that to the FCC registration sites. We use tower owner data and other web-based resources. Then we literally go to each site. We go and we look at the antenna and where it's mounted. Is it on a tower? Is it on a rooftop? Is it on a water tank? Is it on a silo? We want to look at the ground equipment compounds. We're looking to see if the fencing is maintained. We're looking to see who the service providers are. We're looking to see if the coax cable is connected or disconnected. We find all sorts of things when we go to the sites, and then we record all this data, and then we use it later on by putting it into an inventory catalog. This is an example of what the inventory catalog could look like for your community. It's where we take the images that, this is not your community, this is another client. This is just an example of what some pages look like. We take the image and we put it in the catalog, one per site. We show a map that gives the vicinity of that facility. And then we share the data with you in terms of where it's located. Is it a base station or a tower? Who's the service providers that are on there? The height of the infrastructure, and then any notes that might be pertinent to that site. Once we have done that mapping and it has been verified by the community, we run theoretical mapping analysis from those sites. And when I say theoretical, we have a base that we use for the service provider antenna. We don't have the exact antenna dimensions, power density, power outage. See that exact antenna is transmitting, but this is a theoretical map, and it does take into consideration your terrain, clutter meaning buildings, tree canopy, types of vegetation, and we're not wanting so much to concentrate on where the coverage is, but where it is not. So in this particular example, all these different dots represent different types of infrastructure. The black dots represent antennas that are mounted on towers in this community that I'm demonstrating here. It happens to be in Massachusetts. And the purple dots represent small wireless facilities that have been built in the community. Areas that are shown in yellow represent coverage that is strong enough to get into the buildings that are in those geographic areas. The coloring that is green is in vehicle coverage. These blue hues are outdoor coverage areas. And then when there is no shading at all, those are very poor coverage areas. You may not even have any outdoors. So we don't really want in this exercise to focus on these light areas. We want to look at these areas that are not served very well. And those are what we identify as the gaps. And we recognize that the industry is eventually going to want to get into these areas. That's when we look at your public policy and your land use and determine, what's going on in these areas, because typically the industry would try to be there already. We want to make sure you don't have anything in your code that creates a barrier to entry. I'll talk more about that later at a different presentation, but we want to make sure you're not a barrier to entry. We want to make sure that you also have policies in place that address your aesthetic concerns that you can address per the federal guidelines. So this is an example of a series of maps that we produce. We look at the inventory a variety of ways. This is the map for this community that shows all the inventory. Then we do the propagation map that shows the coverage. That's coverage only. It's not capacity. And what you are going to be experiencing, and then if you're not already, we won't know until we do the mapping, are capacity issues. The wireless service providers are wanting to densify their network and provide more network capacity that can handle more bandwidth. So we compare this coverage to the census data, and we look at the census blocks, and we're real curious to see how many people are per square mile in that area. So these areas on this particular map that are very dark, sort of a dark brownish red, that is demonstrating that there are over 10 to 55,000 people per square mile in those census areas. We have a mathematical equation that we use that shows us that this area in here, even though on this map it may have great coverage because it's shown in yellow, chances are because of the number of subscribers that would be in this area would have a capacity issue because there's not enough infrastructure to cover the number of people in that geographic area. Conversely to that, let's look at this site. This site shows that there's 0 to 1,000 people per square mile in this area. And so the capacity in this area is probably satisfactory for that particular area. You come over here, some of it has great capacity, some of it doesn't, or coverage, excuse me, probably because of the topography or the tree canopy, probably the combination of both, the topography and tree canopy. In fact, if you come over to this other site that has the terrain beneath the site, you can see that indeed there's a drop off in here. So chances are, in order to get better coverage in this area, they would need to have another site here. So this is sort of the type of analysis that we do when we get to this part of the plan. We're not there yet. We're just in the beginning stages. Like I said, after we have looked at all of this, we would then look at your ordinance. We look at it from a position of strengths and weaknesses, what's working, what's not working. We rely on you to help us with that. So for example, if you feel like, and this is just an example, this is not relative to the town of Lewisboro. I just want to say, for example, perhaps you want to incentivize co-location. And if the ordinance doesn't have in there a priority preference of service providers using existing infrastructure first, then you're likely going to have more towers built than necessary because you're not requiring co-location as a first option before a new tower is built. So if the community was to say, well, we have too many towers, we want fewer towers, we have a lot of towers in the same area that just has one tenant on it, then that's usually an indicator for us to look to see if you require co-location. So that is just an example. Then we check to make sure that your ordinance meets all the newest federal regulations. We help you to identify and prioritize what the community preferences are and what we call a hierarchy, which is a prioritizing of sites. And every community is different. So I don't even want to speculate at this point what your hierarchy would look like. But some communities base it on zoning, some base it on the type of infrastructure. Some communities do both. So for example, some communities might say, we want a monopole before a lattice tower. Some might say we want a concealed tower before a non-concealed tower. Some communities will even go so far as to say we want a concealed tower in X, Y, and Z zoning district before we have an unconcealed tower in those zoning districts. All this helps to develop a framework on how the industry deploys future facilities within the community. So we also look at the application review process. We want to make sure that you're following the most current timelines, also referred to as a shot clock by the federal government for your reviews, and that you are following all of the other policies that are in place by the report and orders. Once all this is put together, we draft a master plan document that addresses all of this. We submit it to the community for review and take public commentary. We address as many items as we can. Well, we try to address all of them. Sometimes you have a conflict of opinions on how you want things to address. And so our goal is not, or our contract, I should say, our contract doesn't get into the nitty gritty of developing your ordinance to address the specifics that the community may want it to address. But what we would do is if there's commentary that we receive, we'll provide all of that in the document. And then the community can decide how they want to address that in their ordinance. And then once that's all put together, we have the final document. Now, as I mentioned, this is a master plan that is, part of a larger project. So we're doing individual studies and then a broad study. The individual studies for each town will go at a different pace. Not everyone is having their meeting tonight. So believe it or not, you're the first ones to have your public initiation meeting outside of Bedford. Bedford actually started this project, and then they worked hard to help bring in the adjacent community townships, the towns to the project. And then once the supervisors were in agreement, then they went and got funding from the county to help pay for the plan. So it's real clear what the project includes. And I want to move now into a little more explanation about the type of infrastructure that we're mapping. We're only mapping the wireless telecommunications infrastructure. We are not doing public safety. Now, we may look at public safety towers or rooftops if there's equipment on them, but this is not a study for public safety. And I want to share with you some information about the wireless industry so that I just want to make sure everyone has the same base understanding and base knowledge. So that as we move into more discussions, everyone's talking about the same thing. So the wireless telecommunications history started really in the 1980s. You might remember the handheld phones that had like a little suitcase that went with them. Those were part of first generation wireless called 1G. Those were only voice calls. Then we transitioned to second and third generation wireless. The phones got a lot smaller. They were able to start texting. And by the end of second generation into third generation, you were able to get a little bit of data. Third generation, though, really took hold in the early 2000s. It was improving data speed. And then with the advent of the iPhone in 2007, we then started to receive or have access to all kinds of applications for streaming videos, to having a GPS and directional apps built into your phone. You may remember at one point you may have had a separate GPS unit in your vehicle to get directions, and you may have had a handheld phone. Now you have them all in one handset. What we see now is as we move from 4G to 5G, it is all about trying to get more density in order for all these applications to work and for applications to talk to each other. So the Internet of Things, where you would have your autonomous vehicles, they need to have sensors, and sensors tied into wireless communications that make a blanket of coverage and capacity in order for them to work without failure. Examples of non-concealed macro towers are on this slide. This is a guide tower. It has these guide wires that help support it. This is the middle is a macro monopole, looks like a utility pole. And then the lattice tower has the crisscross brackets. Both the monopole and the lattice tower are self-supporting. They don't have the guide wires. We consider these macro cells because of the type of antenna that's on them. You're probably very familiar with these type of antenna. They are typically mounted on a triangular base, and then there's multiple antennas in varying widths and lengths that transmit the signal from these towers to your handsets and to phones and to other towers. Towers can be concealed. These are examples of what we consider concealed towers. This is a faux tree. While it doesn't look like the trees in the background, it does resemble a tree. Then you have what we call the unipole. It's a slick stick. Those names are synonymous, where all these antenna that you see here are mounted inside of this shaft and then covered with the fiberglass RF friendly material. And they can be painted. This one is, the middle is white, and then the example to the left is painted green. They can be painted brown to be, depending on the type of environment, what type of natural environment that they're going into. They can be painted black, a variety of colors. Now, a structure that is not a tower, that is not built for the sole purpose of holding and supporting the wireless antenna, is called a base station. So for example, this water tank was not built to support this antenna. It was built for utility purposes. And so it's considered a base station. This rooftop mount, this penthouse, was not built for the sole purpose of the antenna. So it's a base station. This building was not built just for the antenna. These high tension utility distribution stations were not built for antenna, but if you look closely, you can see there are antenna mounted. So these are examples of base stations. Base stations can also be concealed. Those were non-concealed base stations. Although, let me go back, we actually consider this semi-concealed. And because these antennae are painted to match the facade of the building. And so we consider this one unconcealed, but this one is semi-concealed because you can still see it. Likewise, with this antenna that's been wrapped to try and match the brick facade of the building, we consider that semi-concealed because you can still see the wires, the coax cable. This example is completely concealed because this is a faux steeple that was built, added to the church for the purpose of the added antenna. And this secondary, looks like a secondary story, it's open story. Behind the louvers are all of the antenna and the ground equipment. And so that's another example of a concealment site that's a base station. Now, you may have been hearing a lot recently about small wireless facilities. Small wireless facilities are much shorter in height. In fact, regarding the definition of small wireless facilities that the federal government has put out, the small wireless facility, if it's a brand new pole, cannot exceed more than 50 feet in height. If the antennas are mounted onto an existing pole, they cannot exceed more than 10% in height over the adjacent structures. If they're in the right of way, like this one is, they can go 10 feet above the structure or 10%, whichever is greater. And the antenna cannot exceed 3 cubic feet in volume. So you can tell by this unconcealed small wireless facility that this antenna is considerably smaller than what I showed you previously on those macro cell towers. So not only are these shorter, but the equipment for the antenna is also smaller, like the antenna is smaller. So this is an example of what the equipment looks like. And then the meter that goes with it. Now these are examples. That's an example of an unconcealed small wireless facility. This middle slide or image on this slide is a concealed small wireless facility. This example, the antenna is mounted at the top. It's part of the pole that was built. There is no separation over here. You can tell this antenna was definitely added to this pole, and all of this is visual. On this pole, all of those lines are interior to the pole. The ground equipment, or this equipment that you see on the pole on the left, is all down at the base. And then you don't see how it connects from the base up to the top where the antenna is. If you don't have regulation in your ordinance now for the small wireless facilities, it's going to be one of our recommendations. I can tell you that, because what we're seeing now is an example on the right where the service providers are all installing in this community their own poles. And so, for example, on this slide, Elizabeth, to be accurate, did you say it was AT&T and Verizon?
The pole on the right is AT&T, and the one on the left is T-Mobile.
T-Mobile. And then there's also another one proposed for this exact same corner. Is that right?
That's right. They're building it as we speak.
And that's for which service provider?
Verizon.
Verizon. Okay. So as you start to have deployments, or if you have deployments of small wireless facilities, the goal would be not to allow that to happen unless you want to. You could choose that you want them clumped together versus spread out, or you could choose to develop in your ordinance that they co-locate on the same structure. And if that were the case, then this small wireless facility would need to be designed accordingly. So the macro towers and the small wireless facilities work together. The macro cell towers are pretty much to address coverage and the calls and some capacity for your data. And then the small wireless facilities get built lower in elevation in between the macro cells to accommodate the capacity. So, like I mentioned, we have other communities that are part of the overall project area.
Can I just ask a quick question? You're saying that the small wireless is for capacity, not coverage, the large for the coverage. So you wouldn't use the small wireless to fill in a gap in coverage?
You could, but it wouldn't be this type of a small cell. You would have to have a shorter macro cell. So it would be these types of antenna, because this is the macro cell antenna. It is this size antenna that gives the robust coverage area. These small wireless service facilities are really intended to be between, they're basically about 400 to 1,200 feet apart. And as we showed on the previous slide, you know, if they're all trying to cover the same area, you could definitely have more small cells in the same geographic area. But let's say you were having one service provider with the small wireless facilities, they're looking at from small to small, anywhere from 450 to 1,200, 1,300 feet apart, that for that type of facility.
Can I ask a question? So if you had a densely wooded area, could you accomplish what you want through small cell poles, which would be below the tree line, or would you have to have a macro cell tower?
Right, the macro cell, that's a great question. And for the macro cell, they definitely have to be above the ambient tree height. and they have to be above the tallest buildings and the tallest hill. Otherwise, they need to get up and over the hill somehow. The small wireless facilities are also affected by tree cover. And so ideally, they would be either out of the tree cover, and if they have to be in the tree cover, then they need to be not in the canopy. There we go. So either above or below, but not in the canopy.
You'd also have to have quite a few of them to have continuous service. So if you're hiking in the woods and you go from one, you're covered by one small cell, you can go around the bend and have no coverage at that point. So you would need to have them every few hundred feet for sure for continuous coverage.
Right. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Mhm.
I didn't mean to insinuate that they would always be like 450 to 1,400 feet apart. She's right. If you have a topography change or a change where you go around a bend, then you probably would have to have another one in that area.
Thank you.
Mhm. So this is showing all the communities that are involved in the study. We have Yorktown and Summers, North Salem, Lewisboro, Pound Ridge, and Bedford. This is an overall map. This is a draft map showing all of the existing towers and base stations in our study area. We also go 1 mile beyond the limits of the study, because if we didn't include these sites, it would distort the propagation pattern that we show in our mapping. So for the town of Lewisboro, I'm pleased to say that we finalized our inventory for the town last week, and you have a total within your zoning jurisdiction of 5 existing towers, and there is 1 proposed and under review. The sites that are solid black dots are the existing tower locations. The one that is proposed and under review is highlighted. You have no base stations in the study area for the town. Now, if you go in the 1 mile perimeter, right at the border of that 1 mile perimeter, you do have some base stations. But within your zoning jurisdiction, you have all towers. You also have all macro cells. All the black dots on the map now represent macro cells. If you'd had any small wireless facilities, they would have shown up in a purple pinkish dot. But both inside the town and around the 1 mile perimeter, it's all macro cells or public safety. So this map is showing that there are some public safety sites, and you have 2 sites that are both public safety and macro cells. And again, we don't show the public safety because we're doing a public safety study. We show them because there might be an opportunity for co-location. And so we want to explore those possibilities if those opportunities exist. So we include them.
Could you just identify what's in Mountain Lakes Park on the diagram?
I'm not sure which
That's just north of Lewisboro, Susan, over that green section by the right corner. If you move over to the right there.
Yeah.
That's North Salem.
Right.
Mhm. Right. So you have 2 towers. One's a guy tower and a lattice tower. They are both public safety towers. There is no personal wireless service equipment on those towers at this time.
Could that
That's
be,
correct.
could one potentially be installed there based upon the existing infrastructure?
Well, first of all, we want to look at the propagation maps and see what the coverage and capacity is like in that area. And if there is a gap, that would certainly be something that we would suggest exploring. But it is outside your zoning jurisdiction, so you don't have any control on the zoning piece. And I don't know who owns the property and who owns the towers. I think they're the
county.
right, the county. So then that would be a discussion with the county to see if they would share space, if there's space for co-location on there. And if not, with the underlying property owner, and if it's public, if it's the county, would they allow another tower? They've already got two there. Would they allow a third? But then North Salem would also need to weigh in on whether or not they would want a third there. So that one's a little sticky wicket in that sense. It's not, you don't have as much control over that, but certainly something to look at if the propagation map shows that that would benefit the area.
Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, now we're looking at where these sites are located. And if they're on private property, they are a black dot. If they are in the right of way, they are a purple dot. If they are in a utility easement, it's a brown dot. And on publicly owned land, it's a green dot. So in the town of Lewisboro only have we validated all of the sites. I haven't heard back from the other communities yet, but I can say inside the town of Lewisboro, you have three towers that are on private property. You have two on public property, and you have one in the right of way. And I believe the one that's proposed is proposed on public property. Now this inventory map is showing the design type. All 5 of these, or excuse me, 6 of the existing towers are non-concealed within the zoning jurisdiction of the town. And I believe the one proposed is potentially concealed, a proposed concealed. Now the Lewisboro sites, these are the actual images of the sites that we took while doing the assessments. This is L1, L2, L3. And I know L3, this is an outdated photo. The day we went to L3, we did get a new photo with the image of the antenna on it. We may even have to go back out. The weather was really bad and it wasn't a very good picture. So I didn't want to use it at this time. L4, L6, and L7. And I like what you did at L4 with the base being painted brown to blend in more. So actually, we might be able to move this into the category of semi-concealed versus non-concealed, because you do have some painting elements here that blend in at a lower visual eye line. We'll probably make that change on the next round of maps that we do. So that's your inventory maps and what your sites look like. Now I want to move into a brief discussion on the policies of the federal government that you have to use as a base for your public policies. We start with Section 704 of the Telecommunications Act, which was adopted in 1996. This is enabling language that allows local governments to zone and develop zoning development standards for new wireless communications. However, the policies that you put into place cannot unreasonably discriminate among providers of functionally equivalent services. What does that mean? Here's 2 examples. 1, we used to see ordinances that had a requirement that said you could not locate more than, or you had to be, say, 3 miles away between towers. And for a service provider in the low frequency, that would be fine, but that would not work for a higher frequency service provider. And so that in itself would potentially be a discrimination between the high and the low different service providers. And so you wouldn't be able to have a standard like that in your ordinance. Another example would be to say that no facility can be permitted in any single-family residential zoning district. Well, if the entire geographic area is zoned single-family residential, and there's no place for the service provider to go around the perimeter of the single-family residential area to get service in that area, that could potentially be a discrimination, or excuse me, a prohibition of the service, which is actually bullet number 2. So your ordinance cannot have the effect of prohibiting or prohibit wireless service facilities. And that example that I just gave actually follows that second bullet. The third bullet is that you must act on request within a reasonable period of time. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. If you have a denial, you have to have it in writing with substantial evidence contained in written record. And you cannot regulate and have the appearance of regulating the radio frequency emissions beyond what the commission regulations are presently in place. So you can require that they demonstrate that they have met the requirements of RF, but you cannot deny a request for concerns of RF emissions. Now, in 2012, there was the adoption of the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act, specifically section 6409A. And there's a statement in there that says, notwithstanding section 704, which is what I just talked about, a state or local government may not deny and shall approve any eligible facility request for a modification of an existing wireless tower or base station that does not substantially change the physical dimensions of such tower or base station. What this means is if you have an existing eligible facility, a tower that has been approved through your planning process would be an eligible facility. All of your towers that have been approved and built to date are all eligible facilities. So if a service provider wanted to come and co-locate on there, you would have to allow it. You cannot deny it, provided they do not exceed the definition of a substantial change. Now, I'm going to get more into the definition of substantial change in my next presentation. But for example, some of the standards for substantial change is that they do not exceed 10 feet or 20 feet in height of the existing tower, whichever is greater, and that they don't exceed the ground compound that's existing, or that they don't trench the cables, add additional trenching. If a site is concealed, they cannot have a co-location or extend the height of that facility and have it change the concealment of that facility. So there's a number of criteria that have to be met, but if they meet or do not exceed all of that criteria, you have to allow them to co-locate on that eligible facility. This is especially important as you go forward and approve new sites into the future, because you need to understand that when new sites get approved, they become an eligible facility. So you want to make sure that all of your criteria on how you want those sites to look, both in the right-of-way and outside of the right-of-way, are addressed so that when they come in for co-location, the sites are developed the way you want them to be. So co-location means the mounting or installing on the eligible facility. And that could be a base station or it could be a tower. And the base stations, meaning the rooftops and the water tanks, they have a little bit of a different criteria. It's 10 feet or 10%, whichever's greater. So it's a little bit less than if it's on a macro tower. And then the last thing I want to talk about is the timing. The most recent FCC report and order specifically spoke to the timing of how long a community has to approve and review an application. So if it is a small wireless facility, you have to review that application within 10 days of the initial filing of the application for completeness. If it is incomplete, you must specify in writing and via email to the applicant the documents that are needed for it to be complete. At that point, the shot clock stops. And when they resubmit, it starts back at day one. And you go through this series until a site is approved for the small wireless. If it's a macro cell, you have 30 days to do your initial review of the application to determine if it's complete or incomplete. And when you let them know if it is incomplete and you notify them in writing that it's incomplete, then the clock stops and it tolls until they resubmit, and then you pick up where you left off. So that's a little different than the small wireless. Small wireless facilities, you start back at 1 when they resubmit if the site was incomplete or the site package was incomplete. If it's a macro cell, then it tolls and you keep going where you left off. You have 60 days after an application is determined complete, once it's deemed complete. For a small wireless facility, you have 60 days to complete your review and issue the permit. You have 90 days for macro co-locations. For new small wireless facilities that are not going on in an existing structure, you have 90 days and you have 150 days for macro sites. So I just point out these main bullets. There's more to be addressed, but at a later time. But I just wanted to point these things out. So our next steps are to go back to your inventory map and start working on the gap analysis and looking to see where the gaps are and looking at the land uses in those gap areas and the zoning in those gap areas. And once that's done, it will be time for another presentation to share that information and to get feedback on how the community would like to address filling that in. And that's when we'll strategize on the different ways to do it. Is it macro, tall macro cells? Is it shorter macro cells? Is it small wireless facilities? Is it base stations? Are they concealed? Are they non-concealed? That will come in the next phase of our project. So.
Thank you so much. I have a couple of questions if I can ask them now. I'll start with my most recent one. So your recommendations, are they going to be for Lewisboro or for the larger regional area?
Lewisboro.
Okay. And then you had said that we had no base stations. And then it immediately made me think like, oh, should we not? Like, what are there advantages, disadvantages to having stations?
Mm-hmm. So if you have tall structures that the infrastructure can mount on, some communities prefer to have them go on rooftops and to have them screened versus having a cell tower.
Mm.
And so it would depend on, the types of buildings that you have and where they are.
Thank you. And then my third and final question for now is, you mentioned using the census data, and I'm wondering which census, just because we just had the recent census, which seems to make a lot more sense using that data than the 2010 census data, but I know it's not available yet, and I don't know when it's expected to be available, to be honest.
So we love using the census data because that's typically what the industry uses. If the most recent census data is not available, then our next question is going to be, what do you have? What does the county have? Is there economic development that might have more data? And, but if we don't have any access to that data, then we would have to use the census. And of course, the most recent census data is what we would want.
Great. Thank you.
A question here, sounded like you were going to go out to the field and do more evaluations, but I didn't hear, maybe I missed it. Do you actually go out and and use equipment to test dropouts or signal strength in different areas?
No, we have our propagation maps. We've tested them many, many times in the field previously, and we've not ever had the industry, and the industry has concurred with our methodology and our mapping for this purpose. And so in the beginning, we would go out to the field and test, but now we have the confidence in our modeling to where we don't need to do that.
It just seems that a lot of times we sort of get conflicting information where, we'll get these maps from a tower provider, but and they'll say a certain area is not covered, but we won't be hearing from people there that are like, hey, I have this big problem. So, how do you balance that?
Well, we hear that sometimes as well. It could also depend on who the service provider is and whether or not let's say, for example, Verizon is requesting a tower, AT&T, and it could be that their network needs that vicinity, whereas maybe AT&T or T-Mobile don't, because they don't all have the exact same deployment pattern. It's close, but it's not exact. And so if AT&T already has coverage in an area, and everyone that has the AT&T subscription is working fine for them, but they may not have Sprint. And now Sprint comes in and they need a site and there's no room on the existing towers for them, then it could be that's why they need it.
You'll see too that when we do the mapping, remember this master plan project is one that is designed to project out for your next 10 years. Where is infrastructure going to be needed so that you can plan for that in a way that makes you proactive versus reacting to all the applications that come in. So you'll be able to take a look at the map. You'll see there's a gap area. And even though there's a gap area there, or there's an area that doesn't look like there's a complete gap, but Verizon wants that area and you're like, well, there's no gap on this map right here. But you'll be able to look at, okay, the tower here and the tower here, there's no Verizon on that tower. Therefore, what we do is we have to make some assumptions on the mapping so that it does kind of contemplate that every service provider is on those towers, if that makes sense. So even though it's not on, Verizon may need a tower, you look at the tower that Verizon's not on and you make them demonstrate why they cannot co-locate on that to cover that gap, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
sometimes you're going to have, let's say, Verizon and AT&T have got the two top positions on a tower. And then Sprint comes in and gets the lower position. Does that have a huge effect often on the coverage for Sprint?
It definitely can have the potential of having a big problem. Because if the lower elevation, well, first of all, the lower you go, the less distance the signal propagates.
Yes.
And then the lower you go, sometimes you start to run into the ambient tree height. And that's going to degrade the signal. And then sometimes you also run into terrain issues the lower you go. So it can definitely have an impact, yes.
Right. But sometimes you find providers want that lower because that's what fits their business model. So remember, each provider, each business model for each provider is not the same. And so something that Verizon needs to do, AT&T may not need that in that area. So at a lower height is perfectly fine to get the coverage that they're needing for their business model.
I'm just hearing a lot in, you know, the needs of these companies. We want them to thrive, yes, but you know, here on the board, we think in terms of what the people are asking for, what the people need.
Sure.
You know, that's why I raise this question. It's like we have to balance like the trauma of getting a new tower up with, you know, what do folks actually want.
Well,
And
we're not
regulations.
Yeah, we're not going to promote a particular property. We're not going to promote that you build out the to the plan like immediately. It's information. It's to give you the information.
That the information be complete. We should be doing like either surveys of people or actual, you know, like dropout reports or things like that. I mean, that's the other side of the story, you know, to make a complete report.
I have a question. So this is for Lewisboro. You're looking at it from Lewisboro's perspective, yes? How do you ensure that our infrastructure needs are looked at in the perspective of all the adjacent municipalities? In other words, we're not like pieces of a puzzle for coverage being put together. We're working on filling gaps while we're not having any overlap, which would prevent us, say, from taking advantage of existing cell phone coverage, which might exist in a neighboring municipality.
Right, and that's why we do the study area 1 mile out. Once you get beyond the 1 mile area, you really start to have too much degradation on the signal. And so we include that. And so that example that I gave for North Salem was for that very reason. So that even though it was just outside the 1 mile perimeter, North Salem's part of the study. And so we would hope to be able to have some communications at some point after we see what their mapping looks like and do so and look at that at a larger scale. We also, the nice thing about doing this in a geographic area is you might be able to, and I don't know that you'll be able to do this, but I'll put it out there, you might have some similar design standards so that you don't have an abrupt end and the beginning on what the infrastructure looks like from one community to the other. So we'll just see what some synergies are after we start doing that. But we start with the individual, and then each community will have their own individual plan. We'll look at it on the big scale and see where we can find synergies to share with the communities involved in the study. And then you can decide how you want to share that information and use that information.
Susan, can you share what the ETA is for the final study to be completed?
Well, Bedford, like I said, they started their study a year ago. We would have been finished with it long before now had it not been for the pandemic. And you all have been the first ones to schedule since we had our contracts signed. And for the individual studies, we can go as quickly as almost as quickly as the community wants to go. I mean, we couldn't say, okay, we'll have it for you tomorrow. We need a little more lead time. But yours can be certainly finished before, say, Yorktown's or Pound Ridge. So your piece of the puzzle can get done first or second, and then can sort of sit there and wait until the others catch up to you. And then the whole project, I would love to have it done in 12, 18 months at the most,
Yeah, I thought I recall seeing something less than that, but I have to go back and look at the original proposal.
Well,
But
the
now-
challenge
yeah.
is the pandemic and, you
Right.
know, the travel and being able to be safe in what we do. So if
Right.
we can continue to meet in Zoom, and I can't control when the other communities schedule their meetings. That's really the big variable.
Right. Okay. Thank
I
you.
have the impression that the federal government is maybe slowly, but certainly increasing the pressure for total coverage.
Mhm.
Am I right?
Yes. They have continued to deregulate and chip away at local government's authority to regulate the industry in a lot of ways. And that started with the around 2010. And every year it seems like there's more regulation. The nice thing about New York, though, is as of right now, you do not have policy inconsistent with the federal government's guidelines. We work in a number of states where states have been lobbied and they have even less strict policies than the federal government. So for example, that definition that I gave you for a small wireless facility being the antenna, not being able to be more than 3 cubic feet per volume. In North Carolina and Florida, they changed it to 6. So their small wireless facilities can be twice the size of what is at the threshold right now in New York.
Any other question for these ladies, or shall I thank them? And in fact, you might as well listen to the next public comment period, which is going to be restricted to your presentation and the issue of wireless in Lewisboro.
Yes, and we look forward to that because we are not cookie cutter consultants. And what works in Bedford may not work in Lewisboro, and what works in Lewisboro may not work in Pound Ridge. And that's the last thing that we want. We want each community to have their own character represented in what we do. So we look forward to hearing the comments.
Janet, do you want to take over? And anybody who wishes to ask a question, do you want to bring them in?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Peter. No video will be shown this evening, so I'll just be asking you to unmute. I do not have any hands up yet. We're going to ask Rob Cummings to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
you can, Rob. Yep.
All right. Hello.
Hi.
I'm Rob Cummings. I just want to thank you, Susan and Elizabeth, for coming. I have a prepared statement from the Lewisboro Antenna Advisory Board that I'm going to read. And the Antenna Advisory Board's responsibilities were recently expanded from wireless communication facilities to include fiber optic and other similar technology used for voice communication, data services, and streaming. We are looking forward to reviewing the Cityscape recommendations and how improving Lewisboro's communications infrastructure can enhance the connectivity of our residents, workers, and visitors. This advisory board was originally created by the town in 1998 to provide advice on communication facilities, including buildings, structures, equipment, communication towers, antenna towers, and monopoles. Current advisory board members are Board Chair Joseph Noy, members Jim Morio, Brian Porco, Neil Berman, and myself. As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, working and learning from home with high-speed internet access and reliable cellular coverage is now even more of a necessity for the town's residents. The board is working with internet service providers, cellular providers, and related companies to improve these services to the town residents. We are also working with the Katona-Lewisboro School District to help ensure all students have reliable internet access in town to attend school remotely. We are researching new technologies and industry trends to see what new services can enhance the town's communications infrastructure. We are also examining our radio frequency communications infrastructure to understand and improve emergency communications services used by the fire department, police department, and ambulance services. We are working to help the town's elderly by facilitating telehealth communications, cellular, emergency services, and public safety communications. We want to hear from residents in the town of Lewisboro to learn your stories and challenges in the area of wireless and broadband communications. Examples include, do you have any gaps in your cell coverage? How is your broadband provider handling your work and study from home needs? What have been your experiences with emergency service communications in town? We are looking forward to feedback from you to help direct and reinforce our commitment to improving the communications in the town of Lewisboro. You can email lewisboro.aab@gmail.com to provide feedback. Anything you send will be shared with the entire AAB. Thanks very much, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Rob.
Rob. Now I'm asking Allison Biddle to unmute.
Hi, Allison Biddle, South Cross River. So I just wanted to say that I want better cell service and more consistent coverage throughout our town, but we do need an overall plan that will improve the coverage for everyone, not just piecemeal solutions and technological band-aids. There were 800 signatures on a petition opposing the Cross River cell tower. The tower was approved and ordered without any design discussion or review from the various oversight boards. People were promised that there would be a design review. Where is it? The Cross River Tower is the first thing people see when entering Lewisboro from the west, and should not be. There are many ways to add better service to our town without adding ugly, obtrusive cell towers. For example, in Southport, Connecticut, they attach antennas to a church steeple. There are many churches in town, including the South Salem Presbyterian Church, who would be more than happy to host an antenna on theirs. The more I research, the more I learn, and according to a study done for the town of Bedford, the current wireless carrier trend is getting away from building large towers to provide focused coverage. To reduce impact, wireless carriers are going to the 50-foot utility poles in rural and suburban areas. We moved here because we love country life. The remoteness of Lewisboro is what attracted many of us. Together, we can find innovative ways to improve our service while maintaining the quaintness and quality of our rural community. I want to know what our antenna advisory, planning, and architectural boards think. So when will we hear from them? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Allison. Next, I'm asking Carol Cernak to unmute.
Hi, I'd like to first thank the two ladies that made this presentation. It was very informative, learned a lot of information, you know, about alternatives for aesthetics and coverage. So let me start off by saying the Salt Dome site is operating in conjunction with an illegal operation with Hickory Homes. You know, in my opinion, they need to clean up their act over there before they even consider putting anything at the Salt Dome. That acreage sits within a state regulated 10-acre wetland zone. It's a 2-acre zoning with special overlay for historic views. It adjoins a gift to the town of nearly 5 acres of land with a deed restrictions, a revocable deed restriction, which has been violated in the past. The Salt Dome site also sits between the two farms that the town of Lewisboro uses on their internet page, Echo Farm and Farview Farm. And if you put that cell tower there, it's going to be smack dab in the middle of both of us, and that's not fair. I agree we need better coverage, but that location is not the place to put it. Echo Farm has a conservation easement on their property with the town that needs to be looked into. I don't see any signs of a new master plan. Like, why isn't this in the master plan? It just seems like everything, you know, you close in the door after you let the horse out. Is that the saying? or you're always chasing your tail here. This is not the way to operate. And in my opinion, the town needs to clean up their act before they continue to abuse land that's been given to them and it's been preserved. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Next, I'm asking Dean Travellino to unmute. Dean,
Okay, am I unmuted?
you are, Dean.
Great, took me a minute. Dean Travellino, South Salem Hamlet. I'm very happy to see these consultants here tonight with their information. I think it's welcome to have a consultant that's advising that doesn't have a direct financial interest in what's going on. And I'm glad that they're listening. I'm not sure, I'm sure we'll find out more about how the public gives input in the future, but one thing I wanted to mention was at Mountain Lakes Camp, which is owned by the county, so I assume is regulated by the county and not any of the town's local zoning. The area that's been of interest that I've heard about as far as a tower is just outside of the town of Lewisboro boundaries, about a mile south of those towers that you show, near the maintenance garage. And I think that's a site that I've heard, I don't know, I'm certainly no expert, hopefully you can look at, that might solve a lot of the problems that they're looking for with a tower in South Salem, which actually will be looking at areas in Twin Lakes and a small part of Route 35. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dean. And that appears to be it.
Thank you very much. And thank you, and thank both of you for giving us that presentation. And I look forward to the second, with the second presentation, which I hope we can do within a relatively short period of time.
Thank you, Susan.
All
Thank you,
right.
Elizabeth. We'll be in touch.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I,
Good evening.
Have a good evening.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.
okay, do well. I'd like to move on to a commendation for Sergeant Andrew Llewellyn.
Okay, you can make noise again.
What?
Dean, can you?
Dean?
There you go.
It's all set.
This was written by and signed, and is signed by Chief David Alfano. On Wednesday, January the 27th, 2021, Sergeant Andrew Llewellyn responded to a 911 call for an emotionally disturbed person, a male subject attempting suicide at a residence in South Salem. The subject was initially armed with 2 large kitchen knives and was threatening to kill himself. His father stated that he was able to get 1 knife away from his son prior to Sergeant Llewellyn's arrival. According to the family, the subject had been abusing drugs and locked himself in their home upstairs bathroom with his mother. At the scene, Sergeant Llewellyn found the suicidal subject sitting on the toilet with a kitchen knife to his throat. Sergeant Llewellyn had the subject's mother leave the bathroom so that he could speak with her son. Sergeant Llewellyn spent approximately 3 hours calmly talking with the subject and building up a rapport. All the while, the subject was alternating from holding the knife to his own throat and his wrist. Eventually, Sergeant Llewellyn was able to convince the subject to put the knife on the sink counter and walk out of the bathroom to his bedroom and away from the knife. Sergeant Llewellyn convinced him to walk downstairs and then outside to the ambulance and emergency medical personnel. The subject was transported by Lewisboro Volunteer Ambulance Corps to Northern Westchester Hospital Center without incident. Therefore, I award Sergeant Andrew Llewellyn the Exceptional Merit Award, whereas he is recognized for the risk of his own safety as he performed exceptional police work by convincing the armed suicidal subject to seek treatment without causing harm to himself or others. The dedication, pride, and professionalism displayed by Sergeant Llewellyn reflects upon those values maintained by all the men and women of the Lewisboro Police Department. You are hereby authorized to wear the Exceptional Merit Award bar. Signed, Chief David Alfano, Lewisboro Police Department. I think we should all join in truly congratulating Andrew for a superb job and a very difficult job, quite honestly, to talk somebody down from actively taking his own life.
Yes, congratulations. This shows his de-escalation training and crisis intervention training put into practice in an obviously dangerous and life-threatening situation, and express my gratitude for his patience over 3 hours and making sure that everybody was safe without any use of force. Congratulations.
Andrew is not here this evening. He would be here, except he's taking a course. All right. I'd like to move on to the consent agenda. I'd like to propose that we approve the consent agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I would like to propose a resolution that Andrew Farinaz be hired as a full-time, as of the 1st of February 21 in the Parks Department. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Next, I would like to propose a resolution that Officer Michael Armstead, that Officer Michael Armstead's retirement was accepted as of the 19th of January, 2021. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'd like to propose a resolution that Officer Michael Armstead be rehired effective the 22nd of January, 2021. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Want to explain that for the public, though?
Yeah, I was going to say that might be a good idea.
I apologize that these three were brought up at the last town board meeting, but I failed to ask for formal resolutions at that time, which I should have done. All right. Mike Armstead, by retiring, it enabled him to start receiving a pension. And secondly, it reduced slightly his costs to the town because we don't any longer have to make contributions to his pension.
So we save a little bit of money.
We save a little bit of money, yes.
And Michael Armstead is a part-time police officer for the town of
Oh, I'm
Lewisboro.
sorry. I should have said that if I didn't.
Yeah. Otherwise, to the uninitiated, he resigned and then we hired him right back.
Yes, you got it. All right. I'd like to, I think you are all aware that we have been working on a new chapter in the town code concerning outdoor special events. Initially, we discussed this as a change to the zoning code, but having listened to our planning board and the planning board attorney, they advocated strongly in favor of making it a separate section of the town code. Therefore, we have worked on a new chapter, and quite honestly, I can only find one substantive difference between the new chapter, between the new version and the old version. The substantive change is that we have limited the need for an outdoor sales permit of any kind or an outdoor permit for a special event to those activities which fall outside of a retailer's normal business activity. Let's be simple. If a garden store starts selling plants in his parking lot, that is his normal business, and he doesn't have to come and get a permit in order to do that. Otherwise, this is in intent exactly the same as the previous one. Does anybody want to comment on this?
Yeah, I just want to make it clear, Peter, that what you're referring to is not in the version that was attached to the agenda that's posted on the website.
Okay, but it is all right.
For anyone that's looking at it.
If somebody is looking at the previous one, then they should go to the first page, go to outdoor special events, and the first line of that should now reads, all outdoor sales events which fall outside of a retailer's normal business activity.
No, actually, that's not it, Peter.
I give up.
Yeah, it's the one, right, Greg? Am I correct?
Correct. What was
Can
added.
I just screen share?
What?
Yeah,
Screen share, maybe?
yeah.
So we can
There
all
was
see it?
one sentence added at the end of that permit required that embodies what Peter says. It said about that.
This is the
And
sentence
it's-
right here. Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
I'm just going to scroll down here if I can. It says no permit shall be required for standard normal business operations which are conducted on premises, and that's what Peter was referring to. The normal
Right.
business.
Okay. I'm out of date as usual.
All right. So I think that's the intent that you wanted to capture there.
Yes, the intent is identical.
Not preventing the normal ordinary operations from being outside. Okay, this is more of a thing that legislator to require permits for festivals or other types of events that aren't within the scope of the normal operations.
Right.
Are there any comments?
I think our language is in good shape now after the revisions, and I think we're ready to proceed to a public hearing.
I would like to propose that we set a public hearing for February the 22nd, 2021 at 7:30 or as soon as practical after that time. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'd like to move on to a discussion of a tree ordinance. I hope you've all received that. And I hope that most of you, because the changes are negligible, have been able to make your way through that. And I'd like your thoughts as to the general sense of this change in the town code.
So I just came out of a meeting with the CAC, and they were reviewing, and I guess the chair, John Wolf, had also managed to have a little session with Janet.
Oh, how surprising.
Yeah, so Janet Anderson, our current planning board chair, and but the sense of the group there was that they did want to have a little more chance to look it over. There were a few areas which they were thinking about. One was a concept that Janet and John discussed, which was replacement in the for
The replacement is in this.
So I guess it was then the nuances of that, or the scale of that, or replace with what. So you've got that issue, and I'm sure they're going to think about a couple other things. But so I told them that, if these changes that they might come up with weren't that substantive, we could go ahead and propose the current draft for a hearing, and it would just all get folded up in all the comments that were coming in. But we also asked John to come and give a little presentation. So he's prepared to sort of executive summary presentation of this thing. So he's prepared to do that, but he was kind of, the implication or the intimation that they were making was that they would kind of like to see the hearing postponed so they could have a little more time to look at this. But I said I would bring that here.
Until when, Dan?
I don't know. And I see Mary Shaw is on here raising her hand, and she stated I had to leave that meeting, so she may have even more updated information than I have. If you want to,
Because truthfully, I don't want a vain search for perfection to get in the way of doing anything.
Yeah, no, understood.
And that's what concerns me. I mean, I don't know if Jan Anderson told you how many times she's been involved in trying to get this done. But it's more times than I've been. I've only been involved 3 times, and she's been involved 4 or 5 times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, what happened? We just lost Mary Shaw?
No, Mary?
Oh, there she is.
No, here she is.
Okay. Uh-oh.
She's talking, but it's hard to hear.
Sound is not good.
Yeah, she said she's having problems with her phone or something.
Okay. Must be bad cell coverage.
Well, what I'd like to do is to set a public hearing for a month from now.
Oh.
That would give the CAC an opportunity to come and ask for revisions 2 weeks from now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Janet, when is our meeting roughly 4 weeks from now?
That will be March 22nd.
March 22nd?
No, sorry, that would be March 8th.
That sounds better. I would like a motion to set a public hearing for March 8th. Do I have a second? Or I'll make a motion for March 8th. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Yes,
All
I
in
have a brief,
What?
just a brief comment. When the language is looked at, to take a look at I think the penalties should be increased. They're not commensurate with what replacement value of trees would be. So that's something that should be taken a look at, I think.
I thought of that initially, but I must admit, when granted it is for each tree, that penalty, it could be very substantial, because initially my reaction was, oh, hell, I want to do something in my backyard. I'll pay $500. But then when I saw that I take down 6 trees, let's say, I suddenly thought twice that $3,000 was a substantial amount of money.
Well, equating it somehow to the replacement value would make it commensurate in some way, shape, or form.
I don't know how you do that. I mean, practically, the fact is you can get trees for nothing at the moment. Replacement trees. Now they're tiny, but the state is giving them away.
Some of the schema are based on a percentage of the original girth, rather than just saying a tiny little twig. And so
there's a provision in the law under the real property RPAPL where can be treble damages if you cut down somebody else's tree. And
somebody else's tree, yes, but this
it's showing it's important, is my point.
One of the ideas you might have here is when you have a fine, you're limited by the CPL in terms of what you can impose as a fine for a given offense. Like the maximum fine for a misdemeanor is $1,000. Change to something called the civil penalty, that could be different.
All right, I'm going to leave it to the two lawyers, Greg and Rich, to rewrite the penalty section, all right? And get back to us before, well before the next meeting.
Fair enough. We'll incorporate it into whatever the other comments from the CAC and the other board members are.
Absolutely.
Since we're still in discussion mode, just the other piece, which is, I think the most challenging is probably the enforcement authority.
Yes.
Who's going to do it?
Good, do it.
I've got a couple of thoughts on that. I want to involve the CAC itself. And I've got a couple of candidates inside the town who are currently town employees, because I'm being told by some people that the enforcement officer needs to be a town employee. I'm not sure, but I'd like you to investigate that if you could, Greg.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Fair enough, I will.
This is a good time to be doing this. You are probably aware of Rooting for Lewisboro, which is the garden club effort in the same direction. It's different than what the garden club is attempting to do, is to educate people on the value of trees, and particularly on the value of large trees. And I think that's between us, we can hopefully get people to realize that trees are important. Okay, we didn't pass that motion ever, I think. So I'd like to propose that we set a public hearing for March 8th, did you say, Janet?
Correct.
For March 8th?
We had a motion.
Well,
and a second, right?
What?
We just have to do an all in favor.
Yeah.
Oh,
We had
somebody
motion.
seconded it? Who? You, Rich?
Okay, sure. Okay.
Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Next, I would like to move on to approving 4 borrowing resolutions. These were to some extent discussed at the time of the budget preparation, when there were things we didn't include, but said that they were welcome to come back in the capital and in a capital budget. The first is $180,000 for road repaving. If you remember, I stole that from the highway budget in order to ensure that we moderated the tax increase this year to a level that I thought was more acceptable, granted the economic pain that some of our constituents were facing. That said, I'd like somebody to propose, or I can propose, that we approve a $180,000 borrowing resolution for road repaving. I don't really need a second. I need 4 people to vote in favor of it.
Do we have any idea what it's going to be earmarked for at this point, or that's to be determined?
No, basically, Peter and I normally do, with the aid of Joe and anybody else, a couple of things. We look, first of all, at the Cornell study and what roads are due. We also look at what has happened to the roads during the last 12 months. Because sometimes we find a road that was relatively okay 12 months ago has suddenly virtually disintegrated. I remember one in particular which caused chaos was Wakeman, when it suddenly subsided and we lost a truck temporarily into the gutter, or as the road just went like that. Those obviously cause us to change our priorities by doing those, by bringing them up the list. But that's basically what happens. It's a combination of immediate need, dramatic need, and the Cornell study.
So I move that we authorize the approval of bonds in the amount of $180,000 for the reconstruction of roads as presented.
I need 4 votes in favor.
Didn't
Right,
somebody
but
ask-
I do need a second, Peter, and then I take
Second.
roll call.
Okay, and then you need the 4 votes, okay.
Correct. So
I'll
it's,
second.
well, I thought it was Dan, and then I thought
It was
Tony
me.
had,
Either way.
Okay,
Yeah.
Tony then.
okay,
Tony,
so
Dan, myself, and you need 1 more.
No. That was just,
No.
I had.
who made the
seconded-
motion?
Is this a
I
roll
did.
call?
This is not the roll call.
This
Oh.
is not the roll call yet. Who made the motion?
Okay. I made the motion.
Okay, and
I thought Dan made the motion, or you made the
All
motion.
right,
Yeah,
they
Dan,
can make the motion then.
Dan made the
makes
motion.
I second the
Tony,
motion.
Tony is a second. Okay, then you all go through and say either yay or nay.
Okay, yay.
Tony,
Yay.
Jane,
Yay.
Richard.
Rich,
Yay.
Okay, thank
Dan.
you.
Yay.
Oh, you got Dan already?
Yes.
All right, the second one is $342,000 for the purchase of trucks for the highway, parks, and maintenance departments. There is something that is not made specific in this resolution, but because it's not really a borrowing issue. But the highway superintendent has this truck which is too large for his purposes, really. So he is going to donate that, so as to speak, to parks, and because he still needs transport, he is going to buy new a relatively small, a far smaller vehicle. And that's the cost of that smaller vehicle is included in this resolution for $342,000. There is
Peter,
also.
I was just going to say, just to add, the cost of that vehicle is under, it's the bid price, right? The Onondaga bid, so it's a lower cost than market value.
Well, yes, but I mean, we never buy at market.
Right. I just wanted to.
We
that
buy
point
at the
out there.
cheapest price we can get.
Right.
Except that the price goes up normally by the time we've got all the equipment added to these vehicles that we need.
Peter's on, by
Any
the way,
other-
if we need to have him chime in. Peter Rippinger.
Who?
Peter
Yes.
Rippinger? I said he's on if we want him to.
Okay.
I'd love to say hi to him.
Hello, Peter Rip, *9. I think you're on a phone, right? There he. Maybe not.
Well, any questions for either Tony, me, or Rip?
I'd just like sort of.
Oh, there he is.
Yep.
Oh, no. No.
That
forget it.
these all mapped to the vehicle schedule as we've seen periodically, in terms of the needs and things falling off of lease and things like that. It's all
Yes.
I'm here, guys.
There's
there he is,
Peter.
yeah.
Hello.
Hello, Peter.
Peter.
Hello. Good evening, all.
Hey.
All right. Yes. When it comes to highway, this is very much a question of following that schedule, Dan. When it comes to maintenance, it's a question. They drive them into the ground pretty literally. And we've got to replace one of those. And then we've added a parks employee who needs some means of transportation to do his job.
Peter, Peter, you want me to break this down?
You can if you want.
Well, the explanation be it,
Okay.
We're requesting to replace two of our 207 550 Ford dump trucks. Okay. But not with just the regular pickup a regular dump we have. The ones we want to get, stainless steel that we buy, but are capable of salting. So which will give us the availability of using these trucks to salt in the winter, to work 365 days a year on all duties. And because they're stainless steel in the back, when the time comes, when we decide to, let them go, we can refurbish those by putting a cab and a chassis underneath this. Also, these two trucks are the oldest, and these two trucks, if they are replaced by this, which I recommend, you do not require a CDL license to operate them. Meaning that if we have an employee in the town that works for another department and he's salting or sanding for us, he then, without a CDL license, can operate this truck. Also, gives us the availability to get into the smaller lake areas without dragging the big truck and dragging them around. Also, the other night going out on a fire call, doing a road, we don't have to take a big truck out. I can get somebody to take the little one out. And as you know, we have one 550 that's tied up with sand for a specific run. Now that truck is dead all winter long because it has a special slider in it for sand. That being said, this new truck, or new trucks, excuse me, we can sand, come back, dump it, fill it with salt, and continue on another run. So the versatility is fantastic. Also, the two that are being replaced, as I said, are 207s. They're still runnable trucks, but one of them is getting into a situation that probably will cost us quite a bit. We have the availability, as I have done in the past, to selling to Auction International. Since we've been getting rid of older equipment that nobody needs, we have been able to put over $130,000 back in the equipment line. That being said, these two trucks, I'm sure, will bring a decent price with Auction International, which will then go back into that line.
And if I can add, Peter, from the
nothing,
conversation.
Peter, you may reduce the price we get.
Oh yeah, but here's what I'm after, gentlemen. With these two trucks with the sanders in it, eventually we're looking to see if we can take one of our middle-sized truck above this and eliminate it next year and sell it and utilize this little truck. By doing that, I could cut down one of the middle-sized trucks, save the money there, and utilize this. It's something we're trying to do to get into the 21st century. And as you see, the 207s, they're already 14 years old, serving the town relatively very well. And these here should continue even more so on that because they're stainless. And I think now's the time, as the prices are going up, let's sell these two and not cut our losses a bit. At the moment, they're not needed. The maintenance department has taken one of our old ones in the past, does not need another one, as far as I know, according to Joel. They need something else other than that. And that's where I'm coming from. And we're not looking to buy a big truck this year. So we figured that's the cost of one big truck, those two littles. So I think it's an ideal time to get into this. And that's where I rest my case.
And Peter, the other point you shared with me when we spoke earlier about this was that these trucks, the two Ford 550s, come with the automatic sanders, which will optimize the sanding, correct? So less sanding, salting, especially around the lake areas.
Yes, and also now the newer trucks are all CompuServe. When I say CompuServe, excuse me, electronically dispense the salt. Okay, anytime we're buying the new one, so the computer takes over, eliminates a lot of human error. So these little trucks, we can get them up into some of these tight areas where we run the big truck, but more efficiently to get them in and out and run them out and not be running. These big trucks cost you over $250,000. And if we can be able to next year, I say to you, we'll get rid of one of the middle trucks and we'll only need to get a big truck. You'll start saving down a bit and we'll see where we come from. The fleet is doing good, as you've seen. We've modernized a lot of it, and now we're getting closer. And before we let the thing slide down, I think this is a good aspect to go with it. You know, it's just a win-win, I think, because the taxpayers will benefit and everybody will benefit. And also, like I say, if we got to put somebody in there without a CDL license, you know, they can run down on Saturdays. We spot roads. Well, sometimes if it's hard to get a driver, I can get somebody with a non-CDL license to take out the little truck and run it. And it's being done quite around. I mean, North Salem's got a couple of these trucks and they are around. But for us, the town we are, you know, with our 95 miles of road and a lot of back roads, I think these are ideal for what we want to do.
There's a hand up. We taking any questions on this part or no?
Yes.
Okay. You're not from it. There's a hand up. I just I don't know.
I saw.
Why
but-
not?
Okay. Andrea, I'm asking you to unmute.
Good evening, Andrea Rendo from South Salem. Actually, I saw that you all were covering the approval of the various borrowing resolutions. At this point, when the first public comment only after the meeting started was limited to cell tower. And I think that when we're looking to borrow this amount of money without an indication of what it's all for before public comment is an issue. So I do have some questions, but we're not up to the one with the fields yet. So I would ask that before the board votes on these particular resolutions, that it allows the public to comment and ask questions on what the money specifically is being borrowed for. Thank you.
Okay, but I think, understand that we either do this tonight or we don't do it.
Understood, Peter, but when it took 3 meetings to determine whether or not to attribute an additional $155,000 to the police department for an extra part-time officer for a shift, I would think that it would take time to spend or borrow an additional $435,000 here.
So this would be my answer to the question, why not?
Fine, Andrea.
This is not
Enough.
appropriate.
Thank you.
Let's, if you wish to speak more, speak in the public comment period. I thought it was a simple question. All right, did we approve that or not? Yes, we did, right? Janet?
No.
No.
We didn't? All right, I propose that we approve a borrowing resolution for $342,000 for the purchase of trucks for the highway, parks, and maintenance departments. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Again, Peter, I need a roll call for these.
I know.
That's how
Well,
it's.
do you want to do the roll call or do I? All
You can
right.
do it, it's fine.
Jane.
Aye. Yes, yay.
Thanks. Tony.
Yes.
Richard.
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
Myself, yes. All right.
Great.
Dana, will you unmute yourself? Is she here?
Yes, she is. We need to make her a co-host, Joel.
Yes.
Um,
And I'd like her to help me with the approval, to propose the approval of a $435,000 borrowing resolution for various park and field improvements.
Okay, I'm on.
Okay, go.
I'm asking for $300 for new playground equipment at Honor True as
Would you like to make that $300,000?
300,000, sorry.
Phew.
Our playground has
Small
been
difference.
deemed questionable. It's been under a lot of vandalism in the last few years. And it was recommended that we get a whole new playground structure out there. Life expectancy of a normal commercial playground in a municipality is 15 to 20 years on average. We are just over in between the 15 and 20 years. 60,000 for field upgrades, 20,000 would be to replace the retaining wall at the town park baseball field, that for the past 5 years has been deteriorating. This would put a concrete wall in instead of railroad ties, which will add to the life expectancy. Railroad ties only have approximately 15-year life expectancy. So it will help with the retaining wall where the bleachers are located at the town park baseball field. I asked for $30,000, part of the field upgrades, for 2 new backstops, one at Onatru Field 1 and the other at Upper Fox Valley left. One is the worst one out at Onatru, and the Upper Fox Valley left is the worst one at Fox Valley. Both get significant use with adult softball out at Onatru. Upper Fox Valley left gets significant use with our developmental program. The John Jay softball, high school softball teams, mostly modified, but every once in a while JV wanders over there, as well as our local Katona Lewisboro Bedford girls softball program, which is their only field that they use in Lewisboro currently.
So
Question?
Dana, 30 out of the 60 of the field upgrades are for the 2 backstops, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And it would be just straight up backstops, not the backstops that would come over across the home plate like normal backstops. We're just trying to fix it and make safer and cheaper. And also the backstops that come over home plate tend to crumble faster in storms, as we have seen from Sandy and Irene.
And there's also a composting toilet item in the bond?
Oh yeah, but let me just finish with the field upgrades.
Okay, cool.
So
I feel like
Dana,
once
can
we
I
start
ask a
doing the-
question?
Oh yeah, sure.
Since we're sticking, talking about the backstop. So you had an option of going with galvanized fencing instead at a lower cost.
Right.
Right.
Approximately 5,000 less, but they tend to break down faster with bats being thrown into them, balls being hit into them, people pitching into them. The 5,000, Brandy, who has done this a lot longer than me, felt it was worth going with the higher version to last longer.
And that version is what's already been used for fields 3 and 4 at Onatru?
Correct, yes. And Janet, absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Dana.
No problem. While we were replacing the backstops at those fields, I felt that we should also probably update their dugout benches. We don't have dugouts per se, but we do have team benches there that oh, I'm echoing, sorry, that are just as old as the backstops. And then I'd asked for $6,000 to roll playing fields, which we were doing on a regular basis in early 2000s, but due to budget cuts, they were getting cut. That got cut. So some of the playing fields have extreme lips to them from field maintenance, from cars driving on them, from drainage issues. So I was looking for $6,000 to help make the playing fields safer. And then, yes, the last item was to replace the bathroom facility at Fox Valley Park with a solar paneled composting toilet unit. As we know, we've been on a temporary waiver with the Westchester County Health Department that is probably going to expire sooner rather than later because of the water issue out there. So this would replace the bathroom facility out there.
Joel, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, basically that park runs on a disinfection waiver, which is unusual for Westchester County. So they're not issuing them anymore. So they want us to put in a disinfection system or go to a composting system. Disinfection system would be pretty pricey out there. Besides, we don't have a building big enough to put it in. So that's what we're looking at out there.
Joel, what happens with the existing bathroom facilities? Do they get torn down?
No, they probably go to storage at least. I mean, half of it's being used for storage now. So the building's a good little building. It's just too small.
Yeah, I was going to say, can it be repurposed for something else that could be of benefit to the park?
I'm sure they need space out there.
Okay.
Dana, let's come up try to come up with something for that building. I understand the need for storage, but is there anything we can do which will benefit the people who use the park directly as against indirectly?
Well, it's kind of difficult, right? Because you have two
Well,
bathrooms in either side.
well, take them out, or, right? You're not gonna use them, so you might as well take them out.
Right, but I think if they're too small to have like a meeting room. I know a lot of the cooperating agencies are looking for storage space that they probably might rent from you because they don't want to store their own equipment in a person's garage.
Okay, so
So-
storage is where it is, I guess.
You might get rent from it, sir. The local cooperating agencies ask us all the time if they could store stuff in our barns or garages so that they don't have to store it in their own person. Because God forbid somebody gets in a fight with somebody and then they hold their soccer equipment ransom.
Okay, I was just hoping there was some immediate way of providing amusement and entertainment for.
Yeah, I'd like to explore that along those lines, Peter.
Well, work with
so
Dana. on it.
Dana, we'll talk.
Well, Tony, I'm more than happy to go out there and look at it.
Yes, we'll do that.
I have a question. Hi, Dana.
Hi, Jane.
How are you?
Great. You?
Great. Fine, thanks. So I am curious about this $300,000 for On a True Playground. I'm curious about, I understand all the reasoning behind it. I'm just also curious about the situation at the Lewisboro Town Park Playground, because I remember when we had that assessment, neither one were in very good shape. And we have an interested group of families who started a not-for-profit, who've been working for 1.5 years, have made several presentations. And they recently sent us an email asking for $100,000. And my immediate reaction to that was kind of like, oh, we don't have the money for that. But now that we're borrowing $300K for On a True, I'm wondering about kind of the reasoning behind that, why we chose On a True over working with this organization that, we've kind of been working with for a while. And if there might be some room to go ahead and talk about borrowing funds for different playgrounds in town.
Correct. I met with them after I started this process. So that is why I didn't include it, because where they were, and then that email came out after I submitted this. But yes, I have been talking to them. Yes, Playground Medic came out and looked at both facilities as well as Vista. On a True was deemed the most dangerous out of the three. So that was why I chose to. On a True obviously had the higher priority according to Playground Medic. 1, 2 is I truly felt that the Lewisboro Playground at Town Park would get enough support behind it, but obviously nobody ever anticipated the pandemic from happening just as they were to launch off. So again, you guys are hired or elected to make the tough decisions. I was just asked to put forward what I thought was the most important at the time.
And Dana, which of those two playgrounds get the highest use between On a True and Town Park?
Oh, Town Park by far. Because
Okay.
you got the day camp there. It's a rental facility. As I had spoken to you, Tony, you know what? I am more than happy. I put out this estimate of what it would cost to replace what's out there.
Right.
That I'm more than happy to split up the funds to put a much smaller playground out on a True, to put funds towards Town Park. Like, I'm more than happy to be accommodating, but you all need to realize too, that we have a new wave of town residents with young children coming in, that everyone is fearing population growth, that my fellow cooperating agencies are already seeing with registration.
What was the $100,000 number that I think, Jane, you mentioned?
We got an email from Valerie Cancro. It's in our work emails. It's in the Microsoft team. And they've just been working for a long time, and Valerie came and presented, and their vision for the playground is an inclusive playground, you know, to offer like experiences and material, you know, there's just an interested group of parents working on this. So I would
all that. I'm curious, is the 100,000 like what's needed to get over the finish line? Or
Oh, no, it's to kickstart it.
okay.
The letter says they've had 10,000. The goal is to raise 600,000, and it's a request for the board to pledge to donate 100,000, essentially to kickstart their fundraising and get to the 600 figure.
All right.
I would not have entertained it as much if it was not for this $300,000 for On a True Playground. I like the idea of splitting it up, especially since Town Park gets so much more usage.
Yes, at the same time, we definitely need to, I gather, to get rid of the playground, the existing playground at Onatru, because it's plain dangerous.
Yeah, and Dana and I spoke about that. Again, I may be oversimplifying it, but is getting rid of it, which from what I understand, is a significant part of this amount. Can we do that without hiring somebody? Can we have our town employees go out there with a bulldozer and pull up the base?
Do we know how much
I'll drive the bulldozer
demolition component is?
Yeah, that's what I was scared of, Tony. No, you cannot drive the bulldozer.
So the Dana, you could fill in the blanks, but the component to remove and redo the base was about 100,000, right?
Yeah, the removal, Rich, we hope to do as much as we can in-house.
Right.
With what we have, but we also don't have all the equipment to yank up like concrete footings that are down 4 feet into the ground. I mean, yeah, we can undo bolts and nuts and use specialty saws to cut through metal to remove it. We also will need dumpsters to get rid of, or try to trade in what we can to make a profit off of any of the metal that will be worth salvaging.
And we also talked about potentially rather than one large playground that supports, I think you said over 100 kids. Is that correct?
Yeah, the playground when they built it mid 2000s was designed to serve over actually 150 kids at one time. There's enough components or elements to house or entertain 150 kids.
This is Onatru?
Yeah.
Oh.
What's the most you've ever seen on that playground, like give or take?
Jane, the most is on fireworks, right? When there's all these young families out there. On a regular Monday night softball night that I'm out there playing, probably about 30 kids.
So if we had, and we discussed this idea also, if we had 2 smaller or 3 smaller playgrounds spread out, so not everyone is in that one playground area, that could potentially bring the price tag down.
Right. Yeah, put one of them in the town park at least. Right.
That's one of the points. Yeah, I was leaning towards. So when I had the discussion with Dana, it was before this letter. So my idea was leave the old playground the way it is and sit and we will take it down with our own town employees and build maybe 3 smaller playgrounds at 50,000 apiece.
All right, but can you have? I don't think this is the right forum to decide exactly how we split up that money. We understand that there is a strong move to devote a good chunk of it to the town park. I also think this is one of the items, and I would urge some discussion with Jen Castellano. But I think this may be the area where we are most likely to get some help from Peter Harcum again.
Yeah, and I also
at least try that. All right.
Yeah, agreed.
And along those lines, Peter, I heard from Chris Burdick's office today, and there is an opportunity to get. So, for example, the solar panel composting toilets. There's some potential monies available for that.
Oh, I like that one because I know Peter Harcum has little interest in going to the tour.
So we'll hit both of them up, Burdick and Harcum.
Okay, let's push to get some money from Burdick.
Yeah,
for
for
the
the toilet.
composting toilet, and push to get some money via, well, our best guide there is probably Jen about what Peter is most likely to be interested in funding.
And the deadline for the Chris Burdick thing is tomorrow morning, so I need to talk to you about that.
Thanks.
But
You'd better just run with that.
Okay.
Because I have an appointment tomorrow morning, which is, I'm afraid, nothing to do with the town.
Right. Okay.
So, sorry to throw a wrinkle with the composting. Is there an ADA compliance issue with putting a new bathroom in there?
Well, this is
Rich.
ADA compliant.
Yes, anything we do now is ADA compliant.
Great. Okay.
And we've done 2 of them already with this company, and I think you've got a pretty good relationship with them, Dana, right?
Oh yeah, it only took seconds to get the answers to all your questions.
Yes, exactly. All right. I'd like to make a motion to approve the 435 borrowing resolution for various park and field improvements. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion.
Discussion, Peter.
Yeah.
So we're making this motion, but we're not under any obligation to borrow that amount. So if we decide that the $300,000 gets lowered to 200,000 or 150, we can potentially do that, but we have to do it by a certain time.
Yes, but I would guess you're going to have a battle with Dana, who, if she doesn't spend it on what she said, would spend it on various park and field improvements. Plus, Jane has already put out a strong bid for 100 grand of that. Right?
Is that directed at me or at Tony?
It was directed at Tony, which will get him to say yes.
So that is correct. So let's say we do allocate 100K to the town park. That leaves us with another 200K to play with. And we just need to determine, is it going to be one large playground or smaller one?
Oh,
so maybe
fine.
I can have that discussion with Dana.
Yes, and have that discussion with Dana.
Okay.
And possibly with the Park and Rec Advisory Board.
Yep.
Advisory Committee.
So Dana, road trip to Ontario. We'll do a site visit.
I don't have to go far. I go there every day.
I know.
My second home.
Site visit to your job.
Second, I would like a second. Tony.
All right, I'll second.
Good. Discussion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye. We need to poll on this.
Now a roll call. Richard.
Aye.
Tony.
Aye.
Jane.
Aye.
There's somebody else here. Oh, Dan.
Aye.
And myself, aye. That gives you the 5 votes, which is 1 more than you need. Right? Right?
Yes.
Janet?
Yes.
Unanimous. Can't be
Yes.
any further than that.
All good.
Yeah, you should know if 2 of us weren't here, we couldn't approve any of these. 3 is insufficient. We need a minimum of 4 on each one. Finally, I'd like to propose a resolution for a 15,000 borrowing resolution for the purchase of a ball field maintenance vehicle. Dana, would you like to tell us what the heck this is? You've told me 3 times and I still don't understand.
It's an all-in-one vehicle, like a Zamboni for diamond field maintenance. So think softball fields, baseball fields. It's a drive-on, drive-off small tractor that has bulldozing capabilities to move clay in the front, and in the back it has a mat, a spiked component, and a broom to help maintain the 9 ball fields we have. And just so you know, it's replacing a 1998 one that is held together by duct tape and glue. And we have 9 fields in town from April to September. Pretty much all of them are in play daily. And in the fall, we still have fall ball with baseball and some clinics going through October. So it definitely gets a lot of use 6 months out of the year.
Does it have any other use that it could be retrofitted for off season? I mean, I don't know.
Maybe to plow the town park pond.
Oh, we've been talking
It
about
has
the
its
small
own
trucks for highways,
bulldozer.
so I don't know.
You could ask Peter if he would try to auction it for you at the same time as he auctions his vehicles.
Yes, Peter and I already spoke. If all this goes through, he's auctioning off our green truck that we're getting replaced and this infield pro that that's a 1998.
Okay. And I hope you can get more than we spent for it, because it was a long
Doubtfully,
time.
but Rich, you vote for it. You can be the first one to drive it.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution for the 15,000.
Second.
Roll call.
Discussion.
This is another one that I tried to convince Dana she didn't need, and I gave her some alternatives, but I failed. But I think understanding all the complaints that we've had with our ball fields, especially from visiting baseball teams and leagues, we need this.
Oh, I just figured out my Zamboni, because it's a Zamboni, so off season, if we could take care of some ice to smooth us for hockey. Okay.
All right.
Roll call.
Oh, did we discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Roll call. Roll call.
And then roll call.
Or not because it's only 15 or what?
No, we need it. Peter?
All right. Tony.
Aye.
Dan.
Aye.
Richard.
Aye.
Jane.
Well, you don't quite need me now, but I wanted to put the caveat on about Rich being the first person on it. I definitely, as long as that's the case, I'll say aye.
I'm voting aye, so that gives you the 4 votes and Rich's life, I gather.
Dared.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to the second public comment period. Does anybody wish to speak? I'm sure they do.
I have a few hands going up, Peter.
Okay, I know, I can see them,
yeah,
but I was waiting for you to.
Okay, let me just get to my timer. Okay, Simone, I'm asking you to unmute, Simone.
Good evening, Simone from Vista. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Recently at the police reform meeting, we were subjected to child porn with anti-police cursing in the background. The meeting went on without skipping a beat and continued with yet another baseless attack on our police chief, which yet again he handled professionally and with grace. We have also had people attend and speak in town board meetings from out of state and other boroughs with no connection to Lewisboro. Clearly, these meetings need to be protected, as previously discussed, but sadly not accomplished. A further suggestion I have is to do away with polling of the board. It's unprofessional to discuss what private groups you attend, as well as using this time to attack tax-paying residents and get the last word in. It's cowardly, frankly, and adds nothing beneficial to our town. As town board members are not made to condense their comments to 2 minutes and are permitted to speak throughout these meetings, to continue with polling of the board seems unfairly burdensome on the rest of us. As members of the community are made to limit their comments, trying to stay on point, it seems only fair that we are not subjected to hearing about what groups board members attend in their private lives and to have these comments thrust upon us as if from a pulpit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Simone. Next, I'm asking Carol Cernak to unmute. Carol, you have 2 minutes. Carol? Carol?
Can you hear
one
me?
more- Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody who does everything that's for the betterment of this town, even if they're a little shaded. You know, the character of this town is dissipating. People don't care about it. We're making jokes about hiring Zambonis. I have parents who have lived here for 40 years. They're 85 years old and they can barely afford to live here. I don't appreciate your jokes. The other thing I don't appreciate is how you put out jobs for bid, all this work that's being called for with Parks and Recreation. What is the policy for procurement? What is the policy for hiring people? How many people in town are hired? This town is not what it was, and it will never be what it was. And you all should be ashamed of that. Thank you.
Janet?
Oh, hi. Can you hear me now? Thank you.
Yes. Yes, we can hear you, Jimin.
Thank you. So my name is Jimin Han. I live in South Salem. I wanted to say, we're just barely a month for from the terrible thing that happened at the Capitol, and so I would really. There were so many things that were disturbing about that, and I did go to listen to the police committee meeting, and I was glad that we're addressing some of the things that came down from Governor Cuomo in terms of his executive order. And I would just appreciate that we really address that directly, because it does have to do with, what we saw on January 6th was that there were many off-duty police officers that were part of the insurrectionists, and there was a lot of violence. And so as a person of color in this town, it's just important that we do what that executive order, that committee does actually look at these things, and that we just try as a community to think of ways that we can think about the police in different ways, not in the ways that we always have, but in the ways that could make our community better. I think it's wonderful that Officer Llewellyn won the award, and was recognized. I just want to say that what strikes me here is that he was also recognized because he did an extraordinary thing that maybe as a police officer he shouldn't have been called on to do. Thank you, Janet. I think that we don't have police officers, we don't call them to put out a fire, right? We have a fire department that does that. We should. I just look forward to the committee thinking about ways that it could actually look at the police in different ways and look at the needs of the community in different ways. That would be more helpful, rather than it being used just as a first line, a first response. And I just hope that, keeping in mind the kind of rhetoric that we had coming out of the White House, that even in our town meetings, it would be nice if we were just kinder to each other. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jimin. Next, I'm asking Barbara Mangione to unmute.
How is that, Jenna?
Perfect.
Okay. First of all, I'd just like to ask the board if before the public hearing regarding the tree issue, you can put something on the town website about whatever is going to be the new law so that people can get a look at it before the public hearing. I'd also like to say thank you so much to Officer Llewellyn for what he did. Just an amazing job. And I hope people realize that our police officers are trained to handle these kind of emergencies. And this particular incident clearly shows that the amount of compassion that he exhibited and just his experience and training. And also, if Chief Alfano is still on, I just want to say again, thank you. For 8 months now, the chief and his department and even his family have been under constant criticism, attack, and under a microscope for their behavior. And it really saddens me to see this constantly every single month, whether it's at a town board meeting, whether it's at a police reform and reinvention meeting, whether it's on Facebook, and also in our local newspapers. He gives 500% to this town. No person should have to sometimes deal with the kind of criticism he has received. And it just breaks my heart that him and his family have to go through this. And we should all be very thankful that we have him as a chief. He is constantly the consummate professional. He comports, his whole behavior is one of professionalism, dignity. No matter what is thrown at him, he never gets upset with people. He takes it, he thinks about it, he digests it, all these different words I'm using, and he is always respectful to everybody. So thank you very much, Chief Alfano, and thank you, everybody.
Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara. Next, I'm asking Elizabeth Ray Katz to unmute.
Hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. First, I want to thank Dana and everyone at Parks and Rec for everything that you guys do. You do amazing things for our kids in this town and in the neighboring towns. You know, mine are a little bit older at this point, but they definitely were able to enjoy a lot of the things that the Parks and Rec department have done. And, you know, if they're trying to make things better for, you know, the kids growing up now, you know, I think it's important to give them what they need. Obviously, all within reason. I don't understand why someone thinks they were joking about the Zamboni, because you guys were saying, you know, multiple use, and I'm all about multiple use of things. I do want to echo what Barbara said about Chief Alfano. We all talk about being kinder to one another. And I think it really has to go both ways. I can't imagine being put in his position where he wants to save lives every day and then be scrutinized by the same people that he wants to protect and serve. As for Sergeant Llewellyn, I want to thank you for all you do. When you're on call and off call, kudos to you. You saved a life. And if it's one life that you save or 10 lives that you saved, it's a life. So thank you, everyone, and have a good night.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Next, I'm asking Gavin George to unmute.
Okay, great. Just a quick shout out to the Highway Department. Thank you very much for the recent storms, doing a great job. And the storm's coming. I know you're working with Scotch tape and glue with that budget that you guys are been working with for several years. So great job. Thank you very much. Also shout out to Andrew and Erica. Maybe 6-7 years ago, diffused a situation, mental health situation in my presence, which was fantastic. It was fast and courteous, a lot faster than the way I was handling it. So great job, and great job for that highway department, because man, you guys are working with nothing. Have a good night.
All right, thank you, Gavin. Next, I'm asking Jimbo to unmute.
Supervisor Parsons, please pay attention. Jimbo from Vista Observation. John Stockbridge, a Bedford town historian, most recent letter to editor in the Record Review last week added a new dimension to the Bedford Indian Hill Massacre. He believes a plaque should honor the 600 plus indigenous people who were slaughtered by white, Dutch, and English occupiers. I am tired of the sheer hypocrisy that these elitist, white, privileged people who live in this town, and especially, it pains my heart to say, Indian Hill. Should not this town follow the wonderful example of the John Jay High School School Board, which unanimously changed that god-awful racist name John Jay Indians to John Jay Wolves? Follow their example. Change that racist name of Indian Hill to Indigenous People Hill. Condemn the white racist European murdering colonists for the slaughter of 600 peaceful indigenous people. Change all racist names within Indian Hill and establish a memorial and reparations fund for living ancestors. Live by this example and prove to the town that you condemn white neo-colonial privilege. Finally, I'd like to compliment Town Board Member Crimmins for removing herself from the beginning of the Zoom meeting and not pledging allegiance to a white nationalist symbol. Good job, Jane, and way to be true to the cause. Good night.
Okay, thank you, Jim. And now that appears that that is it. Excuse me, Jeremy Zittimer would like to speak.
Hi.
Jeremy?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Zittimer. I live in Golden's Bridge. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but I think everyone on the police committee meeting from Thursday and everyone who watched understands that the main takeaway of that meeting was that a lot of people of color and other minorities in town, not all, but many, fear interactions with police every day, whether they see them, experience them in Lewisboro or elsewhere. And we saw a fantastic and well-deserved praise of our police department, and yet that fear persists. And it occurs to me that the reason that nobody is comfortable voicing stories when they have them, and people on the side have told me many, and have asked that I do not repeat them because they are scared of retaliation from townspeople. It occurs that the reason that those stories do not come out and that we are not able to improve our police department is because when criticism arises, it is faced with hordes of comments like this that we've heard tonight at this meeting, characterizing any well-intentioned reform or reimagination of our police department as, what is this, some like neo-colonial, anti-white, like extremist project. This is, I mean, listen, y'all, like, thanks, but this is not doing anything for the people of color in our town. This is not doing anything for the police department in our town. This is not doing anything for bringing our community together. And if we want to do what the New York State executive order mandates of our town by law, to look into racial inequity in policing and foster trust and integrity in our local police department, where people of color and other minorities in town do not feel that, it is incumbent that the town board and our police committee finds ways to foster a safe atmosphere for criticism of all of our town's functions, whether it is our Parks and Rec Zambonis or our police department. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. And Robin Legenzowski, I'm asking you to mute.
Hi, I just wanted to say quickly that I feel like we've lost our minds. We've forgotten normal things that are offensive, like being called racist, white supremacist, like that's nothing, by town board members, by people that don't live in the town but think that, you know, they're in charge of how we live our lives. And I'm not saying that, you know, these issues aren't important, but to be called all these things and expect, you know, some nice conversations about it is kind of foolish. Since I've been watching these town board meetings, I've, you know, been called in a lump sum a white supremacist, a racist. I've watched a woman give the finger to somebody who is speaking about our town in a nice way. I've seen child porn, and I've heard racial slurs in the police meeting by more than one attendee. And we also were subjected to anti-police rhetoric, F the police, kill the police, and no one seems to even care. It's bizarre that the only thing we're worried about is if someone complains about the police. We are so lucky to have these guys in town. Who would want this shit job in this crappy town? Yep, Jane. Yep. And you can stop texting the whole time you're in the board meeting. We all see you. And I'm going to FOIL request.
Okay, and I have Cynthia Ryan. Cynthia, I'm asking you to unmute.
Hi, yes. Did that come through? Can you hear me?
Yes, it did, Cynthia. You have 2 minutes.
Hi. Cynthia, South Salem. It's the first time I'm speaking here. I've lived here for 17 years now. My background is such where I'm a descendant from slaves. My ancestors were enslaved. My family has been mixed, both passing and not passing. So living with white privilege and living with racism. I just want to say I watched the reform meeting, and I was really worried about the reaction to the discrimination and the racism that people in this town experience. It is real. Our children, many children are racist, adults are racist, and racist is not an offensive term. We have to teach anti-racism to this community. We need to validate those who experience racism in this community. And this community in town needs to figure out a way for everyone to communicate, not put everyone else down. It is not, I don't want to say it's a black and white issue, but on one hand, it is a black and white issue. I really hope that the town can come to a resolution and a way to pull this town together and support one another, validate everyone's experience, and create a welcoming place and town where people are not in fear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. And there's one hand up, but they've already spoken in both public comments. Peter?
Okay. In that case, I'd like to close the public comment period and ask for a motion to approve claims. Do I have one?
You do. I move we approve claims.
I'd like to second that. Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'd like to move on to polling the board. Jane?
I would like to just give an update about some of the programs going on at our fabulous Lewisboro Library. At 7:30 p.m. tomorrow evening will be the library board meeting for anybody who's interested in attending that. On Thursday, 2/11 at 7 p.m., there's going to be a presentation on conducting your college search in the time of COVID, which I would think would be very interesting to a lot of people in town. Saturday, 2/13 is the Valentine's Day fundraiser. It's the wine tasting online with our own John Vuolo of South Salem Winery. So it is supporting our library, it's supporting local business, and it's a great way to get together with some other community members and celebrate this day of love. On Monday, 2/15, the Lewisboro Library will be closed for President's Day. So just so that people are aware of that. On Sunday at 4 p.m., there's going to be a story of the history of our Lewisboro Library. It went through some recent renovations. What did it look like before that, and how has it evolved? So another great way to get together if people are interested. And then on Wednesday, February 24th, the Lenape Center, which is a center in Manhattan. The Lenape tribe is actually the tribe that had the most indigenous people living here at the time of colonization. And so when we talk about who the land originally belonged to, we can go ahead here in Lewisboro and research the Lenape tribe. So the library at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, 2/24 is going to, it's collaborating with some other libraries, and they're going to bring you this presentation from the Lenape Center. And what a great way to start learning about the history of Lewisboro and the history of indigenous people and how we've evolved from there, which is really what this is all about. And so I'm going to go ahead and leave it with that. Thank you so much.
Rich.
Yes, good evening. Just two things. First of all, I see that with vaccinations, the date's been set effective February 15th for New Yorkers with comorbidities and underlying conditions to make appointments at state-run COVID mass vaccination sites. The first date to make appointments is February 14th. I was noting on social media, Assemblymember Chris Burdick has a downloadable list of non-state-run COVID-19 vaccine providers. So people should take a look at that, as well as checking the town's website for updates on that. Second, and real briefly, I'm a member of the Police Reform Committee, and I think that to a T, every one of the 11 members of the board of the committee, I think, are committed to meeting the mandates of the executive order from the governor. We made, I think, a good amount of progress on Thursday, including beginning to have some difficult and candid discussions, which I thought was very beneficial to our committee as well as our community at large. And I hope we continue on that forward progress that I think we've begun to make. Thank you.
Dan.
Not much, just I'll mention the community solar subscriptions continue. It is an opportunity for people to save money on their bills. And we just did learn that the state is likely to change the tariffs that underlie those. This was a conversation we had with the state NYSERDA agency last week. And in a way that may reduce the discounts that are netted out for participants. This is not happening immediately, but it's, in the next year or so. So that there actually is potentially a better time to do it now rather than later. So that's still out there. You can go to sustainablewestchester.org. And besides that, I'm looking forward to hearing Tony report on the EV chargers.
Tony.
Do you want the report now? So just to touch base on that. So yeah, we have a proposal from an EV charging company who has visited all town-owned properties. And we're still going through that proposal. We're going to be talking to some references that they have provided and see if we can get some of those installed in town at no cost to the town. So that's the EV chargers. In addition, I have some other updates. Let's see here. So the first one is Parks and Rec. I have a couple of announcements. The Valentine Grams were sold out. Thank you to everyone who sent out one to a neighbor or one of the homebound seniors. About 25 seniors will get one. Skiing at Thunder Ridge, a night of skiing for youths has been sold out. The next topic is Zoom lectures by Maureen Coe. She's doing 6 lectures, one on each hamlet. Call Parks and Rec for more information. Camps will be running this summer more like 2020 rather than the 2019 version, but we hope to have camp for kindergartens up to 8th grade. Information will be available soon. Registration is in April. Pam Veith from our seniors program at Parks and Rec is working hard to give seniors help in getting vaccinated. So any seniors that are interested in a vaccination should reach out to Parks and Rec for assistance. Lastly, Governor Cuomo has approved high-risk sports. Parks and Rec hopes to run an outdoor modified basketball league this spring. The other item I have is just want to make people aware of a human rights integration presentation that Robert Keston is providing to the citizens of residents of Lewisboro. It's an introduction to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as foundation to building a stronger community. There will be discussion exercises and the opportunity to consider future steps to develop a more unified, while diverse town. The Zoom will start tomorrow at 7:30. Feel free to join in as early as 7:15. And lastly, I want to thank Andrew Llewellyn, yes, for saving a life. Very fortunate that he was there and was able to assist that individual. I think that's the best thing that can come out of policing or in any profession that touches people. And the other, just a point just regarding when people attack town board members, I think that's not cool. I think Jane Crimmins was not in the picture when she was pledging to the flag. I heard her. So I just want to put that note out there. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.
Okay, couple of things. First of all, will anybody who knows somebody who is who has to stay in their home and is elderly, please give that name to Pam Veith at 232-6162, because I believe that very soon we will have a very limited number of visits to homes to give people vaccination, but only if they really cannot leave their home. Second, on Thursday at 6 o'clock, I'll be chairing a Westchester Municipal Officials Association meeting, which will begin by emphasizing the solar bonus for those who pay their electricity bill. And secondly, we'll have a discussion of the Sustainable Westchester's belief and plan to help the governor move us towards a carbon neutral state. Thank you very much. I'd like to propose that we go into executive session to discuss appointments to committees. Do I have a second? What?
Yeah. If you could mention the meeting, the next meeting.
Oh, I always fail to do that, don't I, Janet? Because it's on the other side of the sheet of paper. There will be the next town board meeting will be on Monday, February the 22nd at 7:30 via remote access. I would now like to propose that we adjourn into executive session to discuss appointments to committees.
Second.
Do I have a second? Thanks, Dan. All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Good night, everyone.